Hi, I'm Long, one of the hosts of Venturely.
Hi, my name is Jaejin. I'm also the host of Venturely. And today we have two very special guests, Manav and Faraz, and we'll be exploring the ins and outs of the next generation of law.
And what actually is law? So before we dive into this, I want to say a big thank you to you guys because this is actually one of our first episodes for the series. And we just really appreciate that you guys are taking your time and effort to be here with us. So before we start, could you give us a small introduction about who you are and what is IY Law?
Absolutely. Thank you, Lon, and thank you, Jaejin, for having us. My name is Manav,
And I'm Faraz.
and we are the joint co-founders of ILAW.
So what exactly is IY Law?
Well, ILAW stands for International Youth Law. It's a student-led organization that we collectively started 2 or 3 years ago in 2022. Since then, we have grown to over 20 countries and over 1,000 participants. Our goal is to utilize the field of law and provide opportunities for students in high school to understand the field before they ultimately choose whether or not this is something they want to pursue. To do so, we have hosted a range of mock trial competitions, both in person and online, across the entirety of the world, with participants from a range of different nationalities. And we are now on track to host both a essay competition, a mock trial workshop, and a online webinar series with a range of different professionals and experts in this field and in this industry.
Yeah, I think that gives a really good introduction to what IY Law really is. And the truth is, our story didn't just begin with a fully organized organization as we have it right now. It wasn't always so polished. It all began 3 years ago in 2022 at Yale University. Manav, Jacob, and I were on a tumultuous ride in a competition known as the World Scholars Cup, and we had reached the final stages in Yale University. And it was there when we realized there was really a gap in the market, because Manav and I are both ardent debaters. We're heavily involved in the MUN community. But what we realized was that while there are lots of programs like MUN for kids interested in international relations, there are so many other debate programs for people interested in public speaking as a whole. But if you're a high schooler who's actually interested in law, what is the equivalent international framework like MUN is for international relations? This is the same gap that not only did we find among ourselves, but among our peers as well, because the World Scholars Cup unites not just a range of people from one particular community, one particular society, one particular country, but cultures of the entire world. And this wasn't a problem that was unique to us. This was a problem that all of our friends and competitors had experienced all over the world. And so it was there, one starry night at Yale University, when we decided we saw this problem and we were going to do something about it. After some intensive conversations with some Yale law professors who advised us on how best to go about our journey, we decided that we were going to start with simple beginnings with a competition in our own home city of Ho Chi Minh City. And since then, I'm glad to say we've never looked back.
Well, that must have been a very long journey. Well, really appreciate you sharing your story. So taking it all the way back, even before when you guys were in Yale, even before 3 years ago, why started with law? I mean, there's many other interesting fields that our school offers, right? Like business, entrepreneurship. Why law?
I think you've said it yourself, that law can be quite a seemingly random thing to pursue, especially because so many other frameworks exist like business, like MUN. But for us, our passion really lay in what wasn't available to our peers. We saw that there wasn't actually an international framework for law, and we wanted to pursue something ourselves. We didn't just want to be followers like MUN. We didn't just want to accept the status quo. And I think that's what really law means to us. It's not just observing what regulations are already in place and accepting the status quo as infinite, but it's to be able to critically analyze the regulations and the parameters that surround us and understand why we have the laws we have and whether or not we can enact change to try and transform that world.
Yeah.
Wow. I think we need to talk about how law is a really inaccessible industry for a lot of youth who want to get into law, right? So what steps are you guys actually taking in order to allow youth to get into the law industry?
Absolutely. Well, I think that's actually a perfect question, because ILAW, the very essence of ILAW is to provide opportunity. As Faraz mentioned, the field of law is one that is essential to everyday life, regardless of what field you do. If you're a business student, if you're a science student, law is still in your life in some shape, well, in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
And we found that students, especially outside the U.S., international school students and students around the world, don't have access to the same opportunities as those in the U.S. As an example, if you see the Mock Trial Association in the U.S., that's a very big out-of-school activity that many students choose to involve themselves with. And it's quite similar to MUN in terms of scale. However, outside the US, that same framework does not exist. Students from every other part of the world don't have access to the same ability and the same opportunities to practice the field of law, to understand what the field of law is actually like in a day-to-day life. So we made this organization to provide this opportunity to students to see if this field of law is something they would like to pursue, and if it's something that they are actually comfortable in and something they would be successful in. And that's why we made iLaw, and that's what iLaw is aimed to do.
And I think it's also really important to recognize that iLaw is not just an organization for our competitors, for the people who participate in our events, although it definitely is. But our mission is greater than that. iLaw is about recognizing the immense privilege that we hold to be able to be in a position where we can spend our civil liberties, we can spend our free time discussing these important, pertinent issues. But a lot of people around the world don't have the same opportunities that we have. And we've brought it upon ourselves to make sure that we were an organization that not just benefits the privileged, but benefits people all across the board. That's why every iLaw competition that we host, we make an effort to use all the funds that we generate from our events, because each competition charges a small participation fee, and that small participation fee goes towards covering the costs of our event, but all additional proceeds go straight to a community partner of our choice. In the past, we've worked with Lawyers Without Borders and other international charities to try and provide education and potentially even legal help to underprivileged communities all over the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And like Faraz just said, while iLaw is simultaneously trying to provide students, high school students, the opportunity to understand the field of law, we are also trying to give back using the field of law to people who don't have the same opportunities that we've been blessed with in our lives.
Yeah, so I see that within law, like Jaejin said, it's a very inaccessible topic, but also a field of education for youths to pursue. And I mean, not everyone has the accessibility to that like us, and we're very grateful for that, and also like you guys. So one thing that I want to ask you guys is, what is a common misconception of law that youth normally has? So as you said before, you know, your experience as Yale, not everyone has that experience. And I mean, same as me. I think for me, law is still a very kind of foggy concept. Vaguely I know what it is, but at the same time, what is law? So yeah, can you clarify what law is, and also what is a normal misconception that people typically has?
I think in terms of defining law, a textbook definition will probably tell you that it's the regulations that govern a nation, typically. But personally for us, what law really is one of two things. Number one, it represents the status quo. It's the parameters that we have to, of the world that we live within. And number two, it presents the opportunity to try and either enforce that or to try and change that. Because lawyers don't just enforce the law, they also create it simultaneously. This is one thing that we've really noticed with our exploration into law, is that the law is not some sort of stagnant state. It's something that is continuously changing. And I think if you look at the Supreme Court and all their rulings, especially recently, you'll find that that's perhaps the biggest misconception that people have about law. It's that the rules are this and they'll never change. It's like, no. These rules are dependent on the populations that they govern. And I think as young people, we really have a responsibility to critically analyze the laws that govern our nations and try and think whether or not those laws should really be in place. And it is only with these discussions, only with this discourse, that we can ever really try to discover the truth. And I think truth really encapsulates everything that law means to us. Law is the method, the mechanism for us to try and get as close as we can to the truth.
But then I would also, I mean, for me, right, I have the experience of living in Vietnam, and I know that law and the truth, there can be lack of transparency at times. And so when you say that law is the truth, it doesn't always have to be the truth. So I think the study of law is also about having that transparency and understanding who imposed the law as well. So then this brings me to another question, because there's this common phrase that people actually say, laws are there to be broken, because For me, I think that laws, without the transparency and the proper governance, sometimes laws can be imposed to maybe mitigate chaos or just to put order on a society where it doesn't have to necessarily be justice or necessarily be the truth, because sometimes there can be lack of transparency in the governments as well. So, what's your take on this?
I think you've said it right there. A lack of transparency is often an issue that, plagues many citizens of the world, because frankly, if you don't understand something, how can you possibly be expected to follow it? And I think at iLaw, what we really want to do is make this really intimidating subject become that little bit simpler. That's why recently we've started hosting courses on Schoolhouse. We've also started our new webinar series that wants to really simplify the concept of law to our listeners, understanding the nuances of different legal systems in different societies and how they might go about pursuing that particular field in their respective countries. But as you've said, it's not just a question of whether or not law is intimidating in its whole, but also for young individuals who want to get into law. Say other teenagers like you and me, who are 16, 17 years old, who maybe want to pursue law in the UK, in the US, Australia, or anywhere else. How would they go about pursuing that? In the UK, for a lot of universities, you need to take the LNAT. But these are not things that are readily accessible to a lot of students all over the world. And so our new webinar series, which is set to come out next month, aims to combat exactly that. It aims to break down the college admissions process for 5 of the top university destinations in the world. And through that, we hope to educate and also inspire the next generation of legal minds.
Well, then not just for the youth, but then what about you guys? What steps are you guys taking to actually enter these universities? Could you actually break it down to us here right now? That could be quite interesting.
Okay. Well, absolutely. As a part of the foundation of iLaw, we actually did contact a number of different lawyers, both here in Vietnam and around the world, to support us on this journey of understanding how to provide students in high school the opportunity to understand this incredibly important but incredibly difficult and challenging and complex field. And in doing so, we've also found a pathway for us as students to get to this level, to get to these incredible heights that they are at in their careers in this field of law. And as a part of this journey, Faraz and I are obviously very keen on one day pursuing law, possibly going to law school. To do so, we are obviously involved in a number of different clubs in our school. For example, MUN, debate, mock trial, and of course now iLaw. And if you are a student at home who's also thinking, maybe this is something for me, maybe I would also like to pursue the field of law and become a lawyer one day, we encourage you to do the same. Obviously, make sure your subjects are oriented towards a field of law. I recommend subjects like English, history, if you have the option, philosophy and politics and global politics. But regardless of what you take, your subjects do not define what you can take in university and beyond. You are entitled to study whatever you want to do if you put your heart and mind to it. And we recommend doing some research in your own time as well. There are numerous resources out there for you. However, if you'd like to reach out to us, we would be more than happy to help you. Please do email us at our email on contact@ilaw.com or .org. Reach out to us on our website, on Instagram, and of course, it is our mission to support you as a high school student in getting to where you want to be in this incredibly important and valuable field and industry.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. And I also believe in youth as well, because often youth are quite underappreciated. And then I also think that it's great that you are serving a platform to increase the equity and access to law. So then this leads to actually another question. Do you guys think, what is the capacity of the Gen Z generation in reshaping the law field? Like for many other industries, our next generation is quite, almost to some extent, quite revolutionizing. We got the use of AI. We've got many new technologies that are reshaping multiple industries. What is your take on this for law then? Is it the same or is it different? And if so, then how is it different?
I think that raises a great question. What is going to be the impact of AI on the legal industry? And I think in order to understand that, we first have to preface that answer by saying, we don't know, and nobody does. But if I can take you back to 1968. 1968 was the first year when seatbelt laws were introduced in the United States. Seatbelts were seen as a mechanism to try and control road accidents that actually happen out in the world. But what actually transpired was something completely different. Number one, the issue with seatbelts in America was that they were perceived to be an infringement on people's civil liberties. So people were like, we don't want to put on seatbelts. The government cannot tell us to put on seatbelts. So there is this really interesting discussion about whether or not seatbelts are an infringement on people's personal private rights. But beyond that was a wider discussion of whether or not seatbelts would reduce car crashes, whether they would reduce road accidents. And what actually happened was completely counterintuitive. Ever since the imposition of seatbelt laws, the number of road accidents and road deaths actually increased because people were wearing their seatbelts, and this caused a moral hazard. People perceived that because they were wearing seatbelts, they were less likely and they were more safe from car accidents. So therefore, they decided to drive more recklessly. And the seatbelt, which was designed in order to reduce road accidents, to improve road safety, actually had the exactly opposite effect. So when we consider the use of AI in our legal fields, it can seem like a silver bullet for many. You no longer need to hire an expensive lawyer in order to get justice. But on the other hand, if AI can do everything, do we need lawyers at all? And so when we go about approaching this discussion, we need to understand that life does not work in one chain sequences, but we need to consider not only the next step, but the consequences that AI has on our world. And so we need to understand that AI is not just good or bad, but the actual discussion of the impacts of AI is far more nuanced. And the impacts of that will only become apparent in the decades to come. That is not something we can answer now. It's not something we can answer in 6 months, definitely not even a year from now. The fact of the matter is, only time will tell.
Oh, that's very insightful. I want to ask, what are your favorite memories from IY Law that you've experienced within the past few years of doing IY Law?
Well, I mean, the experience and the journey we've been on these past few years has been unbelievably rewarding, both for Faraz and myself and everyone on our team. Over the course of these past 3 years, we have grown our team massively. We have students from around the world who are supporting us on this journey to provide high school students the opportunity to understand this incredible field of law. And I'd say the best part for me and the best memory I would have is working with these students. It's been great to see so many different students reach out to us and say, hi, I'm a student from Nepal and I love what you're doing. I would like to start this in my school. And seeing this passion, this raw passion, and seeing so many students having this shared motivation to start something and to give it the fuel it needs to grow in their own location and provide students in their location from their area and their neighborhood and their culture the same opportunities as other students from around the world is incredible. And it just goes to show the power that you can have on the world. And yeah, I understand this is the point of this podcast, to showcase the world, the power of the youth, to showcase the potential of the youth. And we've seen that firsthand with ILAW.
Why do you guys think passion for law is really important?
I think passion for anything really is very important. But in the case of law, it's really important to understand why we have the regulations that we have. And I know I've said this before, but I think it's really important to emphasize this point, that if we do not understand why we have the laws that we have, we're bound to be oppressed by them. Laws are regulations on how we can actually live our lives. And if we keep going about our lives without critically analyzing this, without critically thinking about this, before we know it, we'll find ourselves defending the indefensible, justifying the unjustifiable. And the fact of the matter is, our lives will be nothing more than the lives that other people have wanted us to live. And in order to preserve our own individual autonomies, we need to take it upon ourselves to constantly question, constantly critique, to have the checks and balances necessary in society for us to have a truly valuable community.
Yeah, but speaking of opportunities, because before we were mentioning about the inequity and access to law. So since we have the opportunities, I also believe that we should leverage this to increase access of law to others, which is exactly what Iowa Law and you guys are doing. But then personally for you guys, do you guys see yourself in 10 years still pursuing law? Or is this just like a project for during your high school experience? Or
I'd say at this moment in time, yes, my plan is to one day go to law school and to pursue a career in law. But of course, we'll see where life takes me. There are so many different opportunities available to students around the world. Now more than ever, students can pursue literally whatever they want to. Law is not a concrete choice for many people. Nowadays, you can go to law school, you can still pursue something completely different to what you studied in university and in your high school days. So I'd say, yeah, time will tell. We have the world ahead of us, and we'll see where we go.
I largely echo the sentiments of Manav. I think what's really important with iLaw is not necessarily whether or not we'll be involved with this particular organization in 10 years' time, but rather the values that iLaw embodies, and those values of honesty, of a desire to search for the truth. These are values that I 100% believe that we will be pursuing in the future in 10 years' time, no matter what context we find ourselves in, be that in a massive law firm, be that fighting for human rights in Rwanda, be that fighting for the environment in Colombia. It doesn't really matter. What really matters is that we stay true to our principles. And I think that's what really counts.
Okay. I think, just in case, because of the high demands of the law industry, are there any other skills that you guys are honing in, just in case that law may not end up as you guys want it to?
Sure. I mean, of course, as I mentioned before, we don't know where life is going to take us, and we always have to be ready for the unexpected. As such, we are not solely focused on studying in law school. I didn't mention this before, but I actually would like to study an undergraduate program in the United States before attending law school, and this could involve something along the lines of political science or economics. Because I feel like you have to, before you enter law school, before you enter this industry, you still need to have your foot in a specific area of interest to you. For me, it's economics. For you, it could be business. For you, it could be science. It really does not matter as long as your end goal is still the same. And for me, the end goal is law school. The end goal is pursuing a career in law, regardless of how this may shape out in the future.
Now, moving on, what role do you guys think youth plays in the future of law?
I mean, I think if there's one thing that I could say to the youth out there who might be interested in law, it actually brings me back to one of my favorite philosophers, Friedrich Nietzsche, who has this great quote, and it goes, "I know of no better life purpose than to perish in pursuit of the impossible." And what I think that means to me is that no matter how unattainable a goal may seem, that's no reason for you not to try and pursue it. And I think that's a lot of the dilemma that our present-day youth are experiencing. They look at law and they see it as something that is intimidating, something that can't be changed, something that's not worth pursuing. And I think that is really the perception that we want to change, that just because something seems difficult, something seems impossible, that's no reason for you not to try and change it. Because you never know. That dream that you have, that vision of the world that you have, it's not really that far away. You can do whatever you set your mind to. And don't be discouraged just because it seems like you can't.
Okay, Manav, so what's one final message that you want to tell the audience?
Okay. Well, regardless of who you are, regardless of where you come from, if you were a student watching this podcast and you're thinking, maybe this is something I would like to pursue in my life, I would like to enter the field of law, or I would like to just garner a taste of what the field of law is like as a high school student, please do not hesitate to reach out to us. We here at iLaw are more than happy to support you in starting a chapter in your school, hosting a competition, starting a mock trial event, starting mock trial workshops, starting a webinar series, an essay competition, or a podcast. Regardless of what you want to do, if it's related to the field of law, reach out to us. We are more than happy to help, and we're here for you as a high school student to a high school student.
And that's a wrap for today's episode for Eventually. Big thank you to Manav and Faraz for being here today, and it was a very insightful discussion about law.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us. It was a pleasure to be here.
Absolute pleasure.
So thank you for watching today's episode of Venturely.
And stay tuned for the next video.